There is a chamber under the most photographed monument on Earth, and until 2 years ago, no living person had ever seen inside it. When the archaeologists finally broke through the packed earth beneath the treasury at Petra, their lights fell on something the site had never produced in 200 years of digging. Bodies, not fragments, not scattered bones swept in by floods. 12 human skeletons lying exactly where they were placed 2,000 years ago. And one of them was holding something in its hands. Petra has been excavated since the 1800s. Explorers, treasure hunters, entire university teams have crawled over that rose-colored city carved into the cliffs. And in all that time, the tombs kept telling the same story. Empty. Always empty. Robbed in antiquity. Scoured by flash floods. Reused by nomads for shelter. Grand facades leading to bare stone rooms. So when a team dug beneath the right side of the treasury in the summer of 2024 and hit a sealed slab that had never been broken, they were looking at the one thing Petra was never supposed to still have. An intact tomb with its original occupants inside, undisturbed since before the Romans came. The lead archaeologist was Pierce Paul Kreisman, director of the American Center of Research. He said it plainly. In 2 centuries of investigation, nothing like this had been found before. And that is where the story should end. A rare, beautiful discovery. Except the closer they looked, the stranger it got. Because the position of these bodies, the object in that skeleton's hands, and the reason nobody found this chamber for 2,000 years, all point at something the tourist brochures will never tell you. This was not a random burial. Somebody sealed 12 people beneath that building, on purpose, at the exact height of Nabatean power, and then made certain the location would be forgotten. The question is who they were, and the question underneath that, one, is worse. Because the deeper the excavation goes, the more it looks like this chamber is not alone. Let me show you how they found it, because that part matters. For most of the century, everyone assumed the treasury was a solid facade over a single hollow room. Then, in 2003, a team digging on the left side of the building found 2 small tombs, partial skeletons, 7 sets of fragmentary remains, and then the project stalled. Funding ran out. Permissions to dig at one of Jordan's most protected monuments are almost impossible to get, and the ground went quiet for 20 years. But one detail stuck with Kreisman: symmetry. The Nabateans were obsessive about balance. If there were hidden tombs on the left flank of the treasury, there was every reason to believe matching chambers sat on the right, buried under the same compacted earth. For years, it was just a hunch. Then, in 2024, his team finally got permission to scan. Here is the part almost nobody reports correctly. They were not even looking for treasure. The official survey had a boring, practical purpose. Petra sits at the mouth of a narrow canyon called the Seek, and every few years, flash floods roar down it and tear through the plaza in front of the treasury. The team, working with geophysicist Richard Bates from the University of St. Andrews, ran ground-penetrating radar across the forecourt to map the drainage, to understand the flood risk, to plan how to protect the monument from water. The radar was supposed to find soil and rock. Instead, it found holes, voids, empty spaces under the plaza where there should have been solid ground. Bates ran the signals against the known tombs on the left side and compared the patterns. They matched. Whatever was down there on the right had the same shape, the same echo as chambers already known to hold the dead. That was the proof they needed. The Jordanian government granted permission to dig, and in August of 2024, they opened the ground. The chamber was small, roughly 5.5 meters on each side, less than 3 meters high. A single sealed room. And inside it, laid out in the dark, 12 complete human skeletons. Men, women, children. Not thrown in, not disturbed, articulated, which is the word archaeologists use when a skeleton is still in the anatomical position it was buried in. Every bone where the body left it. In Petra, that is almost unheard of. Nearly every other tomb in the entire city had been emptied or wrecked. This one was pristine. And if you're the kind of person who needs to know who they buried down there and why, subscribe now, because this channel opens sealed chambers and abandoned digs every week, and this one is still being excavated as we speak. Now, here is where it gets strange. Around the bodies were grave goods, vessels of bronze, iron, and ceramic, fine Nabatean pottery, painted, the kind reserved for people of status. That alone tells you these were not ordinary citizens. You do not get buried beneath the grandest monument in the kingdom unless you matter. But it was one specific object that stopped the room cold. One of the 12 skeletons was holding a cup, a ceramic vessel shaped like a chalice, cradled in its hands against its chest. You need to understand what that meant to the people standing there. The treasury of Petra is the exact building used in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade as the resting place of the Holy Grail. The filmmakers picked it because it looks like a place that would hide something sacred. And now, 2,000 years after it was carved, real archaeologists open a real sealed chamber beneath that same facade and find a real skeleton clutching a grail-shaped cup to its chest. Josh Gates, who was documenting the dig, called it history imitating art. But strip away the movie, and a harder question remains. Why is one body out of 12 holding a chalice? Nabatean burials do not usually work this way. Archaeologists have called it the only known example of this configuration in a Nabatean context. One person, singled out, sent into the dark, holding a cup. Was it a priest, a patriarch, someone whose role required that object in death? Or was the cup the reason all 12 of them were down there in the first place? We do not know, and that is not a dramatic flourish. The people who opened the chamber genuinely do not know who these 12 are, or why they were sealed together beneath the most important building in the city. That brings us to the second clue, the building itself. We call it the treasury. In Arabic, it is al-Khazna, the treasury of the pharaoh, a name invented by later Bedouin who believed a pharaoh had hidden gold in the stone urn above the door. They used to fire rifles at that urn trying to crack the treasure out of it. You can still see the bullet scars. But there was never any gold. The name is a legend layered on top of a mystery, because the truth is that no one actually knows what the treasury was for. For decades, the leading theory has been that it was a mausoleum, a tomb monument for a Nabatean king, most likely Aretas IV, who ruled at the peak of the kingdom's wealth in the 1st century. It's a reasonable theory, but it was always missing one thing: a body. For all the assumptions about the treasury being a royal tomb, no royal burial had ever been found in it or under it. The mausoleum theory was a room with no occupant, an empty coffin of an idea. And now, suddenly, there are 12 occupants, dated by the pottery and the sediment to exactly the window when Aretas IV ruled and the kingdom was at its height. Elite goods. A singled-out figure with a chalice, buried in deliberate, sealed, undisturbed order. Beneath the facade, everyone always suspected was a tomb. Kreisman's own leading hypothesis is that these are members of the Nabatean elite. Possibly, he has said, the royal family itself. The alternative is a high priestly family granted the rare privilege of burial beneath the main monument. Either way, the implication is enormous. For 2,000 years, the treasury has stood as one of the most recognizable structures on the planet, and we may have just found the people it was built to hold. But that explanation has a problem. And the problem is the ceiling. If this were a normal royal tomb, meant to be honored and visited, you would expect it to be marked, accessible, remembered. Instead, this chamber was buried so completely that 200 years of archaeologists walked directly over it and never knew it was there. It took radar looking for floodwater to find it. Whoever put these 12 people in the ground did not want the location to be a shrine. They wanted it gone. Covered, forgotten under compacted earth, at the foot of the stairs where 1 million tourists a year now take photographs, never suspecting that 12 bodies lay a few feet beneath their sandals. Which raises the third clue. And this is the one that turns a discovery into something ongoing and unsettling. The 12 are only what they found first. As the team kept working into the 2026 excavation season, expanding the area around the chamber, the radar and the digging kept suggesting the same thing. There is more. Indications of other adjacent tombs, not yet excavated, sitting in the ground around the first chamber. The 12 skeletons beneath the treasury may be one room in a complex of sealed chambers, most of which have never been opened, most of which no one has looked inside since they were closed 2,000 years ago. And that is where the modern science comes in, and where the mystery deepens instead of resolving, because the bones themselves are talking. The remains went to a laboratory. Researchers began isotope analysis on the teeth and bones, chemical signatures locked into the skeleton during life that can reveal where a person grew up, what they ate, whether they were born in Petra or came from somewhere far across the Nabatean trade world. The Nabateans were a people of caravans and incense routes, and no one is entirely certain where they originally came from. Their origins are one of the genuine open questions of Near Eastern archaeology. These 12 bodies, sealed at the heart of their capital, may carry the chemical fingerprint of that answer in their teeth. And then there is the DNA. The team has been seeking authorization for ancient DNA analysis, the kind that could reveal whether the 12 are a single family, related by blood, and whether they connect genetically to other Nabatean remains found elsewhere in Petra. 12 people buried together beneath the throne monument of a kingdom. If the DNA comes back and says they are one bloodline, then we are almost certainly looking at a royal or high priestly dynasty laid to rest in a single chamber and hidden from history. But the DNA has not been fully published. The isotope work is ongoing. The permits for the deepest analysis move slowly, the way everything moves at a monument this protected, where every excavation is weighed against conservation and the flood of tourist money that Petra brings to Jordan. Nearly every part of the story that would tell us who these people actually were is still, right now, waiting behind a laboratory door or a government approval. Now, let's slow down and be honest with each other. Does any of this prove some hidden secret, a conspiracy under the treasury, a deliberate cover-up 2,000 years in the making? Probably not. And you should be suspicious of anyone who tells you it's certain. The grounded explanation is straightforward, and it is still remarkable. The Nabateans were a sophisticated civilization who carved a city out of rock and controlled the trade in incense and spice across the ancient world. Burying elite dead beneath a monumental tomb facade is exactly the kind of thing such a culture would do. The chamber was hidden by nothing more sinister than time and flash floods. The same floods the survey was mapping when it stumbled on the voids. The chalice may simply be a burial custom we had never happened to see intact before, because every other tomb was robbed before anyone could document it. The reason this find is astonishing is not that it is supernatural. It is that it survived. In a city where everything was emptied, one room stayed sealed, and gave us the first undisturbed look at how these people actually treated their dead. Every piece has an ordinary explanation. That is true, and it matters. But here is what the ordinary version still cannot do. It cannot yet tell us who the 12 are. It cannot explain why one of them was sent into the dark holding a cup that no other Nabatean burial has ever produced. It cannot tell us how many more chambers are still down there, sealed in the rock around the first one, or what those chambers hold. And it cannot explain the strangest fact of all, which is timing. For 2,000 years, this was invisible. It took a flood survey, ground-penetrating radar, and a hunch about symmetry to find one room. We are, right now, in the first 2 years of looking. The excavation is not finished. It is barely begun. If the bodies are a royal family, then we may have found the actual dynasty that ruled Petra at its golden height. The people the treasury was built for, still resting under it. If the origins encoded in their teeth point somewhere unexpected, they could rewrite where the Nabateans came from. And if the adjacent chambers are what the radar suggests, then the most famous monument on Earth has been standing over a hidden necropolis that no living person has ever fully entered. That is the part that stays with you. Tonight, when the last tourists file back up the sick and the lights go out over the canyon, the treasury will do what it has done for 2,000 years. It will stand in the dark, that impossible facade glowing faintly in the moonlight, 6 stories of rose sandstone carved by hands we still barely understand. And a few feet beneath the plaza, in a sealed room the radar found by accident, 11 bodies will lie exactly as they were placed. And one will go on holding its cup, in the dark, waiting for the next door to open. Because the digging is not over, the chambers around it have never been touched, and nobody yet knows what the Nabateans buried beneath their greatest monument, or why they worked so hard to make us forget it was there. If you want to see what else the ancient world hid in plain sight, watch the next investigation on screen right now.